And then, all right, well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We definitely appreciate you bearing with us as we get everything set up. We'd like to welcome Kay Whitlock today as our speaker. She will be presenting on engineering ethics and practice. I'll try to be brief. Kay has a long list of experience and titles, but Kay is a vice president working for Christopher Burke Engineering up in the Chicago area with a wide variety of experience. And she's been very involved with ASCE, with IAFSM, and many other organizations. And also, as I spoke with Kay, she's given a lot of these engineering ethics talks to multiple different groups. So she's definitely very experienced and knowledgeable in this field. So today we have the honor of having Kay speak to us about these topics. And we will, just so everyone knows, we will have a few polls, some case studies that Kay is going to present later in the presentation. So we're hoping that we'll get some listener feedback, and please try to pay attention and take part in the polls just to make it a little bit more interactive. So with further ado, just one note, we are recording this and we will post this to the website, to the IAFSM Young Professionals page after the presentation, also with the PowerPoint. And then hopefully later this week or early next week, for those of you that are calling in and being part of this presentation, we will provide a PDH certificate. So just keep an eye out for that. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me after the presentation. I think everyone has my email. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Kay and take it away. Thanks, Kay.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I saw a list of some of you, and some of you know me pretty well, I think. So you'll also find that there are going to be some of these slides today that we go through. I've tried to label them as Kay's opinions. I've been thinking about our professional ethics within primarily within the civil engineering workplace for a long time. And I'm not going to answer any questions for you today, actually, except to help you think about your professional responsibilities and our collective professional responsibilities as we continue to work in the workplace with the kind of stresses and pressure that we all feel as we do that. And so just in the beginning, as a starting off, I just want to have you think about the fact that an ethical construct represents the norms and ideals which we aspire to. It's sometimes very difficult to get to that aspiration. It's clearly not a topic that's clear to understand, and it's sometimes very, very difficult to put into practice. But our success in achieving those obligations depends on how well we consider and practice a solid understanding of professional ethics. And one of the ways I think about it is that our professional ethics reflect our values. And most of my comments today are a little bit more tailored to civil engineering, but within this workplace, there are a number of CFMs who have very similar responsibilities, may not be licensed as civil engineers or licensed as professional engineers in Illinois. I think many of these principles in the workplace that we work in will still be significant and important to you. And I've been thinking back over the years to the first time I really started to understand what a big responsibility it is to aspire to be an engineer. And the brutal wake-up call I got as a young adult was from my physics professor when I was a sophomore in college. And he had this way he operated his class where He gave no partial credit for anything. You either got the answer right or the answer was wrong. And until that point in my education, nobody had ever treated my work that way. So it was quite a wake-up call for me. And to give you an idea how well I did, the first exam we took, and the other thing he did, which I thought was kind of cruel, is he handed out the papers, your test papers, in order of your grade, in ascending order. So the lowest grade in the class was handed out first. And he announced to everybody what your grade was. So on the first exam, my grade was 10%. And of course, I was in this class. It wasn't a very big class, but I was the only woman in the class. And starting to realize that I needed to prove myself, that I had a brain in my head. And then he proceeded to make fun of me for a little moment and then handed out the rest of the exams. Well, to let you know how well I did on getting the answers right, my last exam that semester was 100%. So I really took him to heart. I thought it was a brutal lesson, but I've never forgotten it. All these years later, I can still visualize that physics classroom. It was such a stunning day for me. But what he said was, if you become an engineer and you're working on a bridge and you make a wrong calculation, that bridge may fail and people may die. So everything you're doing, remember that it's very important. And I think sometimes we all need a reminder every day that what we do is very important. And so, although I told you I'm not going to answer questions, I do think that there's a lot of value in this debate and figuring out how this can work, that a code of ethics provides a framework for us to sort out our actions. It gives us guidance in our decision-making process. The other thing it does, so those are the things it does for us, for the rest of us, all of us together, it sustains our credibility within our profession, because by adopting a code of ethics, it announces that we have intentions to behave and do our work in these ways. And it helps us collectively police our responsibility collectively. So it gives us a platform to ask for somebody to do a peer review so that we can make sure that the modeling we've performed is correct. It sort of opens those doors in a much more comfortable kind of way. And then the other interpretation that I always keep in my mind is that, unlike lots of other professions, for civil engineers, our responsibility by statute in most states, and certainly in Illinois, is that we are licensed for the protection, public health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Illinois. So those of you who are water resources people, and I assume most are, know that the state of Illinois holds the waters of the state in public trust for the citizens of Illinois, and I believe that we as professionals hold our responsibility in public trust. Interesting contrast in the early years of my looking into ethics was that our attorneys, however, have a responsibility, and if we all get accused of a crime, we're going to want to have an attorney that believes this, is their responsibility is to give the defendant the very best defense that they can give the defendant. In the medical professions, nurses focus on compassionate patient care and patient advocacy, whereas doctors' first consideration is for the health of the patient and having respect for human life. And sometimes compassion and human life can get into each other. So, you know, a doctor could do something that's very, very painful, but it will help preserve your life. And so it's important to not assume that everybody that we're dealing with outside of our professional world have the same ethical responsibilities that we do. one of the places that you will hear the word ethics used is in the government agencies that we all work with or for will adopt ethics codes, and state legislators adopt legislation about ethics. Those are typically developed to avoid bribery, and they will, the Illinois ones, for example, set a limit on how much you can accept a meal within a limit, or I read of one somewhere once that you could not accept a golf game from a consultant or a contractor, but you could accept a tennis game. And I always thought, well, okay, the drafter of that statute must be a tennis player. Sometimes it'll talk about reimbursing expenses or those kinds of things. But in terms of our professional responsibilities from an ethical point of view, those, they give you the specific rules about small things, but they don't really help you with the big picture professional ethics, in my view. So if you're a member of a professional society, they often adopt codes. And I'll talk a little bit later about the ASCE code. So ASCE has a code of ethics, NSPE has a code of ethics, SAME has a code of ethics, and it's informative to go to those websites for those organizations and just take a look at those. The ASCE code of ethics starts with an introduction of some fundamental principles that are pretty well universal across the nation. I worked a few years ago on an ASCE task committee looking at professional codes of conduct internationally and learned pretty stunning things about what happens in other countries. And I have a cousin who's a mechanical engineer, and he's done international installations in factories, and he said one of the things he has to look at are what are the design codes in different nations, because some nations protect the user of the equipment in a much more restrictive way than others do. So it starts, ASCE's code though, starts with this, that engineers uphold and advance the integrity, honor, and dignity of the engineering profession. And then it talks about the specifics of using knowledge and skill for the enhancement of human life, being honest and impartial and serving the public with fidelity, striving always, day to day, to increase the competence and prestige of our profession, and supporting professional societies within our disciplines and supporting our disciplines. And then there are 8 fundamental canons that are listed under that introduction in the ASCE Code of Ethics. But first in the list, as it is really first in the Illinois statute too, is the safety, health, and welfare of the public. And so a number of years ago, ASCE added the sustainable development to that. Some of these others have been the same for literally decades and decades. And then it goes through 5 through 8, goes the rest of the way through. And number 8 was modified, I think, just about 2 to 3 years ago, when they sort of refined the look at how they talk about equitable participation and actually defined gender identity, national origin, ethnicity, and a number of categories of citizens that previously had been not necessarily treated equitably, so that our profession has a responsibility to do that in terms of a wide array of diversity. And having spent my whole career working on flooding and flood control projects and stormwater management, I ran into situations early in my career where I was really troubled that we couldn't find a feasible project in one of the south suburbs streams because it protected a very poor community, and construction projects in a poor community generally cost just about as much as they do in an expensive community, but the benefit cost analysis didn't play out. And that troubled me personally for a long time, is how can we do a better job of that? And so if I ran into that waterway now, I would probably go to this canon number 8 and see if I could find a little guidance to be more fair to the citizens that that my projects are serving. And then another organization that now has become affiliated with ASCE is the Order of the Engineer. I've participated in this ceremony 3 or 4 times because I always love this participation. It was started originally many, many years ago when a bridge failed in Canada, and the engineers who were involved in that took the steel from the bridge and they made little rings. And in the Canadian rings, they're faceted, and you wear the ring on the little finger of your right hand or your working hand to signify all day long as you're working your responsibility as an engineer. And it helps remind me that we do need a peer review of a model. We do need to review documents very carefully. We need to be sure that every calculation we do is the right way. And I see this on my hand, and I wear it when I come to the office every day. The interesting thing about my code of ethics, which I can't defend or quite explain, is I don't wear it on Saturdays and Sundays. And if I get on I-88 heading to the Quad Cities, I often drive as if the speed limit is 88 instead of the nomenclature for the road. So I can't defend that behavior, by the way, but I've not had a ticket yet. So, but anyway, if you have an opportunity to take the Order of the Engineer ceremony, I encourage you to do that. It's happened to me only a few times that I've been in a meeting and realized that another person in the meeting had their ring on, and some of them asked me about it and how long have I done it. And so in the ceremony, you stand up and you recite this Order of the Engineer together. And when you have a group of people doing that together, it really reminds you of your responsibilities. So I encourage you, if you have an opportunity, to do that. If you haven't had an opportunity and you're a member of a professional society, you might suggest that they consider having a ring ceremony at one of their meetings. And then I'm also a member of SAME, and so this is the code for SAME, for the members of SAME, which is the Society of American Military Engineers. Primarily, that organization is made up of people who work with military, the Corps of Engineers, the Air Force, the Navy. Many people who are in SAME work on military bases, supporting the installations there. And then one of this one I recite once a week with my Rotary Club, and it's just a simple thing, but it's a reminder of behavior. And we do at the end of our meetings every week a 4-way test that we recite together. And not all clubs do that, but it's a great reminder of why that group of people comes together once a week. It's not just for lunch. And then I label this one as Kay's opinion. Another Kay opinion is that, and I truly believe this deeply, is that every task we do as an engineer has an ethical component. And we need to remember that every day. We should not tell people that we can perform work that we haven't had the education and preparation to do. We need to check and double check our work. we need to check and double check our calculations. You know, I work in a modeling world, so it's not just, is the model we used being used correctly, but there are many decisions we make when we're getting ready to do a hydraulic model. We choose the software that we think fits that situation best. Often we choose the software that the regulator prefers because they've concluded that that's the one that fits best. So, but there's decisions in that, and you could choose a simpler way to model the hydraulics of a stream, but it might not give you the best conclusion and the really best results. So everything, if you start to think about everything that you do as having an ethical component to it, I think it will help you making your decisions on a daily basis professionally. So Adam said that we would have some case studies. So I've just got a couple, and I've never watched this happen. I participated in a webinar where we did it, but Adam set these up so that you can actually say your opinion. And this one is pretty personal to me because in 1990, I took a job in the Silicon Valley, and I had been a registered professional engineer in Illinois since the day I qualified to take that darned exam. And I took a job in a public agency in the Silicon Valley in California. And I was not registered in California, and so the question came to me as soon as I got to San Jose is, how do I want my business cards set up, and what's my signature block going to be on my agency communication? And it occurred to me for the first time that I had to make a decision about whether or not to use my license on my signature block and on my business cards, because, you know, on a very superficial level, I was a registered professional engineer. So I found a couple of years ago a case that was looked at by the Committee for Professional Conduct of ASCE. They looked at a similar question. So the question that Adam is going to set up for you is, would it be okay, would it be ethical for me to identify myself as a PE on the business card and on the signature block, and just toggle yes or no? And I don't know how you do that, but Adam is setting that up, and then I'll tell you what the outcome was.
All right, so I've opened the voting or poll question. We'll just give people some time to vote, and once the majority of people have responded, then we'll close it out. All right, we'll just give people till a minute, and then we'll close it out, and then Kay, we'll look at the results, and then Kay, you could provide your research insight. All right, so looks like we've got 27%, 15 people said yes, that's ethical, and 41 people, 73% say no.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so let me tell you what I did. Because it was a hard question for me, because I was so proud to be a registered engineer. But my conclusion was, because I was going to be dealing in a state where I wasn't registered, and I'll give you further information, is that the PE license is much harder to get in California than it is in Illinois, because you have to pass a structural component because of the earthquakes. And And so I decided that I concluded that I would be sending a message that could be so easily misinterpreted. So I never used my PE on anything publicly that identified me when I was in the Santa Clara Valley Water District, because that was the right decision for me based on what I was going to be doing, in my view. The ASCE case that was covered in one of the ASCE magazine columns in 2017 or 2018 was about a guy who had a challenge filed against him through ASCE's professional conduct committee. Was that this professor, who was registered in 6 or 7 states, was doing some research in a state that he wasn't registered in, and publishing his conclusions under his signature block, and his vita had his credentials, but none of those PE licenses covered the state where the research was. So the committee heard the arguments and considered the information, and they concluded that it would have been better if that professor had clarified that he was not a PE, as his vita indicated, which states he was a PE. He was not a PE in the state of the research, but they didn't think it took it to the level that there should be a punishment for it. So I think those 2 cases are a little different. I did it my way, and I felt good about my decision. But it's just the little articles in ASCE are very interesting to me, so useful for judgment. Shall we go to the other one, Adam? The other case study?
Yeah, we can move to the next one. And if you want to read it first, then once you're ready, I'll launch the next poll.
Okay. So in this one, it's more of a not so hypothetical. I think many of us have been in a circumstance pretty similar to this. You're employed by the city, and you've been placed in charge of a project that's under construction by a private contractor, sort of our world every day. Because of your education and the experience of kinds of jobs you've had before, you've made suggestions to the contractor that have improved the project and saved them some money and some construction time. And in our world, construction time is money. And the work was still performed according to the plans and specifications that had been prepared and that were signed and sealed by professional engineers when they were delivered. So one day you're on the construction site, project's coming to a close. The president of the company drops by, and she has a cooler of soft drinks and bottles of water, and she offers those to the crew that are there, her employees, and then she also offers one to you. So the questions are, if the president offers you a soft drink, may you accept? And what I want you to think about, but it's not on the questionnaire, is why? But what if she has a case of wine and she offers everybody a bottle of wine? Can you accept that? And what if she's got just some ballpoint pens, which every one of us who works in consultant probably has somewhere, a little drawer full of ballpoint pens from different people. What if she offers you that and it's got her construction company name on it? Is that okay? Think about it. But what if you get a jacket? What if she offers you a jacket? And then the following week, there's a closeout meeting, and you're going to do a lessons learned meeting, and the president offers to pick up the tab. Can you ethically accept this offer for her to pick up the tab for lunch? So Adam, can you show us how you set that up?
Yes, so I'm going to launch the poll. So everyone knows this is a multiple choice poll, so you can choose which of the following you believe are ethical and to accept. You can choose more than one answer, or you could choose none of them. So feel free to check off. And we'll see how the responses are. I might give a little bit more time on this one.
Can the attendees see the answers as they're coming in, Adam?
I'm not positive. I know once I click share results, they could see it.
Okay.
I think people could see it live, but I'm not sure.
I don't see anybody on my screen who I can see their faces, so if someone's nodding, I can't I can't see that.
All right, we've got almost everyone. I'll give people another so a minute and 30 seconds. Oh, there's someone said they can't see the poll answers live. So,
Okay.
all right, well, we've got 59 people. So I think we're gonna end the polling and I'll share the results. So it looks like the majority of the people said soft drinks are okay. A few people said bottle of wine. Again, the majority of the people, 81%, said ballpoint pen. Looks like 12% of the people said jacket and 31% said it's okay to accept a lunch tab. So thanks for everyone's responses.
Yeah. Okay, and that pretty well aligns with my thinking. I probably would not accept the bottle of wine, but I would definitely take a bottle of water or a soft drink myself, because I'm on a construction site. You know, I would also use the restroom if they had one there. And I obviously I would take a ballpoint pen because I have a box full of them at home. I probably would not take a jacket, but I can see circumstances where you would. And I myself would accept the lunch unless it was, if it was a working meeting and it was in a reasonably priced kind of neighborhood restaurant, I wouldn't take a lunch tab. I wouldn't let a contractor buy lunch for me if it was a fancy lunch. But and if I did accept it personally, I would probably suggest that I leave the tip in cash, because I've learned over the years that servers sometimes don't get their own tips. So that would be kind of my way to compensate for accepting that that offer. But the thing that's interesting to me for you to think about is, not now, but as you think about the ethical construct of doing your work, why were your answers what your answers were? So that's actually the more valuable part of the lesson. And I had a client once who worked at a public agency, and we were going on a construction site, and I suggested that we get a cooler and take some water to the site because it was summer, it was August, and it was dusty. And that client said, well, we needed, the people who were coming were permit reviewers. We may have a few permit reviewers and regulatory agencies on the call today. And that client said that would appear to be bribery, so he wouldn't do it. And so I called the people who were coming and said, you might want to be sure you bring a water bottle or, you know, something, because if you get dry, there's not going to be anything on the construction site. So I felt like that was a little extreme, but everybody makes that decision for themselves. And the important part is how is it going to look to others, and how is it going to feel to yourself? So thank you for participating in those. Let's go on. I guess I have to get rid of that, Adam.
Okay, actually a quick question.
Yeah.
Since it's related to this case study. One of the participants asked if it wasn't the president of the company, would that be different? Say if it was a superintendent or someone else on site that offered some of the same things, would that change your opinions? It's a good question.
It's a really good question. For me, it wouldn't. I mean, my answers are my answers, and but that's really an interesting way to look at that. You know, from my thinking, the drinks are probably part of being on a construction site, and the ballpoint pens are part of business. But yeah, I said I'm not going to really answer questions for you today. I just want to sit you thinking. So that's your judgment too, based on your own ethical construct. Okay? Okay. Now I can't get it to move, Adam.
Oh. Let me end the poll. Are you able to go to the next screen now?
No.
Do you want to try clicking on the presentation and see if does it let you do anything? There we go.
Oh, there we go. Okay, let's see now if it moves forward. Okay, so let's go back a little bit to the mechanics of ethics. So this is sort of how I think about a lot of things I do, is if I'm looking at City of Chicago's stormwater ordinance, if I've never looked at it before, the first thing I do is I go to usually it shows up in the ordinance documents for municipal government, the date that the city adopted the whatever rule or ordinance allowed this to be put in place. And I always start with, okay, what's the basis of this? And so for me, the mechanics of ethics, as do most everything else I do, it starts with the states in Illinois, with the state statute that puts that in place. If I'm working on a Corps of Engineer project and I want to understand the cost sharing rules, I will go to their authority to have a navigation project or a flood control project or an ecosystem restoration project. And I will start there, and then I will look at the guidelines for that kind of a project, because that first basic structure sets the framework upon which the rest of the regulatory or guidance follows. And it's the same with ethics. So what I recommend that each of you do, and in the presentation, if you access it later, their locations. It has the Illinois compiled statutes listing for that. But that sets in motion everything that follows. And so in everything you look for in most states, that health, safety, and welfare of the public is the foundation that document. You'll find that in the state statute. And then if you've never studied that structure, I suggest that if you're interested in continuing in your investigation of ethics, that you start with that and then look at the professional guidance, the rules that are adopted as a part of implementing that. And then it's difficult and it's not straightforward. And the reason when we did that poll, not everybody agreed on anything, is that it's part of a decision-making process that we do, and we do it every day. And so what we do as professionals is much more than just those simple things we think we do, which is to fulfill a contract, write a scope of services, do a plan. I just yesterday worked with the team here and we finished a report and got that out the door. So all of those things are built on our construct for putting the document together. And keep that in mind. And then I recommend that each one of you think about a more personal code of ethics, and think about it yourself. And so I pulled together just a few simple codes from different religions that almost all are actually the golden rule, but different faiths stated in a different way. My favorite among those, because of the tagline, is the one by Judaism, and that is, what is hateful to you, do not to your fellow man. And this is the part I love. That is the entire law. All the rest is commentary. So as far as I'm concerned, we got a whole lot of commentary around our ethical codes in engineering. And then I wanted to share with you, I may be showing my age here a little bit, is from one of the famous philosophers of my early years was Elvis Presley. And he said, values are like fingerprints. Nobody's are the same, but you leave them on everything you do. And, you know, I wouldn't necessarily say I admired all of his decisions in life, but you do leave your fingerprints everywhere you go and on everything you do. So keep that in mind as you're practicing your profession and making your decisions going forward. And then I would take you back to the lesson from my physics professor. Now, he didn't say this, but this is the way I simply think of it. If we lie, I do think of making a bad calculation as really close to a lie. If we lie, people die. And we can all think of examples of, well, those of us who work in floodplain management in particular can think of floods that we've seen where homes were washed away or where decisions were made. I was really struck by this in the 1993 Mississippi River flood when I visited along the river and the floodplains that year, that late that summer. The nursing homes that were placed right in floodways and right in floodplains, and the thought of the decision process that led us as a nation to build those facilities for those vulnerable among our population in a place where it really wasn't safe to be. So I like to say it's not always simple. It's not always straightforward, but it is always important. And I encourage you to keep that in mind as you go through your day-to-day work. And so I've said questions here, but we'll get back to questions in a moment. I just wanted to tell you that in the PowerPoint presentation, there's a list of some sources of further information. If you want to find any of those or anything else, I have a number of resources that I've accumulated over the years. And I try to update this every time I do the presentation, but I don't always have, there's sometimes new things that I haven't found or got listed yet. And then this one has a more detailed list of resources. My probably simple favorite that I've mentioned to you is that Texas Tech facility, that National Institute for Engineering Ethics. They actually, I've got some books that they have published that have been very helpful, particularly many of the books around the topic. And one of the more, this one's a couple years old. The professor who is the prime author on here is someone I've taken a class from, Steve Sterrett, and this little book is just full of case studies. So they do the class through a lot of case studies, and he did the day I did the class. So I think many of you have known me before. You know how to get in touch with me. And I certainly welcome any discussion, disagreement. You got my email address. Please reach out to me or give me a call. I really miss talking to people these days. And then let's see if there's any time. We got 10 minutes or so, Adam? If there's any more questions or
Yeah.
challenges?
We're definitely good on time. Thanks, Kay, for definitely a lot of really great insight. I don't see any questions in the chat yet. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Feel free to submit them now, or if you'd like to speak up.
Yeah, you guys are muted. I'm trying to look and see who's there. Steve Scheffel will probably have something for me afterwards. Wow. Yeah, there are a number of people I know. Maybe it's good I didn't know you were there before we got started.
I guess, Kay, a question I'm thinking of, have you, I guess in your experience, have had a lot of hard discussions with either coworkers or even clients or other contractors on things that they may not realize unethical, or maybe they're just trying to save money? And how do you approach that? Or you have any good methods?
Yeah.
I mean, you just say, well, this is the code, so really it's straightforward.
I actually haven't worked on design a lot. I've worked so much of my career at the stage of helping someone else's work get permits or cost sharing. I've had lots of discussions about why peer reviews are important, why our quality checks, our internal review process is important. And that's not been difficult, because if I have that discussion, it's because it's a project I'm in charge of. So there may be people who disagree with me, but they don't generally get into an argument with me about it. I had a friend who worked on mobile networks of phones, and he was doing cell phone installations in Russia years ago, and he told me he went to a meeting in the Soviet Union and sat down to negotiate with someone, and the person he was negotiating pulled out a revolver and laid it on the table. So I think of all the discussions I've ever heard, that was the hardest. But I always assume that our construction engineers have a lot of those discussions. And I've had clients who've told me that since I've been at Christopher Burke Engineering, that their construction engineers that they hear, who they trust on a sensitive environmental site, because they know they're very particular about how that work affects the sensitivity of a site. So I really don't have a lot of tough stories of my own, and I think that partly aligns with the area of the work.
Okay.
Yeah, so the guy didn't pull the gun on me.
So we do have a few more comments come in. So the first one, Kay, your examples were from the perspective of the taker. Is there anything different if you are the giver?
Oh yeah, that's a great way to put it. Right, there is. And we run into this more around a meal. And so I have in my desk drawer a list of all the different agencies and levels of government in Illinois, because at a consulting company, I'm often a giver. And so I know sort of going into it what those rules are for county governments, for the agencies that we work with, for the municipal COGS, and I always check to make sure that I've looked that up so that I don't offer something that doesn't comply with those constraints. Or in Illinois and in many of the government agencies, there's a rule for accepting gifts that if you make a charitable contribution of that value amount, then that can offset something. And so, but I try to be really cognizant of that. And I know that we've been to dinners where I just offered to buy the meal, and there's some people who can't accept it, and I just make it work so that they don't have to accept it and they don't get embarrassed. But it really helps to always think about that from the perspective of how comfortable or uncomfortable that's going to make the potential recipients, and not ever put anybody in a circumstance where they would be not want to be impolite to me or disrespectful to me, but that I've disrespected them by making an offer. So I try to be very cognizant of that. And, you know, I just have that collection of those guidelines. And once many years ago, I turned down an offer of lunch and just said, no, I need to pay for my own lunch. And the consultant, I was working in a public agency at the time, and the consultant that had offered to buy my breakfast, I think it was, told me later that he never forgot that example, that I just matter-of-factly said, no, thank you, but I don't do that. So, but it is, I should set one of those up from the giver point of view, since I've been living the giver life since I've been at this company in consulting.
Yeah,
thank you.
Good points. Another question, it's actually a case study. So the question is, I don't know if you see this, Kay, as well on the chat. An engineer is designing a subdivision in a city where he is very familiar with the subdivision rules, but his client tells him to skip things in the design to save money. The review engineer finds most of the other skipped items, but a few get through the review. The design engineer says it is not his problem, as the review engineer should have caught it. Is it ethical for the design engineer to approach his work in this manner?
Woo! Wow. I wouldn't think so. I mean, my first take on that, David, is that I wouldn't think so. Because often, you know, with a regulatory agency, even that many of us work sometimes with some regulatory agencies much more than we do others, we know those rules sort of upside down and inside out. So, but the thing is, if you're applying for a permit, you know, I just know this is what's going to catch you if you stick with your guns. So I feel like that adds value. Boy, very good case study. David, should I add it to my list?
And then we have one.
Yeah, it's really a dilemma.
Yeah.
I think it was not be okay, but I'd have to really think about how to deal with that without getting crossways with the client, the review engineer. You know, it's in our world, we really don't want to correct the review engineers very often.
And then I think Steve had a comment that he's had a whole bunch of ethical dilemmas faced in his career, and if he had a nickel for every time I heard but the city village approved it, I'd be on the cover of Fortune magazine. So
and tomorrow or tonight he'll send me a Dilbert cartoon that has that picture. Right, Steve? Okay.
All right. Any last questions before we conclude here? We definitely appreciate all the feedback and interest.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really enjoy this topic, as you might have been able to tell, and welcome, welcome further discussion about case studies or dilemma that you're trying to sort through and how to get there successfully.
Yeah, so well, thank you very much, Kay. It looks like we don't have any other questions at this point. We really appreciate your time and expertise on this important matter. If anyone has any further questions or comments, feel free to reach out to Kay. She's provided her contact information in the slides. Again, that will be posted to the IAFSM website along with the recording. And keep a lookout. We're going to send out a survey just to get everyone's thoughts on the session, and we definitely appreciate it. And the PDH, just keep an eye out for that as well. We'll send out PDHs to everyone who attended. But we appreciate it, and thanks everyone for joining in. Have a good day.
Okay, thanks guys.
Thank you.